Since I'm lazy and I don't want to edit this, I'm gonna warn you that this is kind of abrupt. So if a 12-year-old is watching this, I don't know. So I'm just warning you, their methods are abrupt for dehumanizing someone. If you don't know what dehumanizing is, it's making someone basically into a soulless robot. So you can command them to do things, so they listen to you, so they follow orders. A puppet. Okay. This may sound weird, but this is what they do. Hold on. I gotta copy all of this. Um, Actually, I don't. This is a whole entire book. Let's just do this part.
The dehumanizing of a multiple, that is of a fragmented personality, is done to most of the alters, but the front alters are allowed to be human. Because alters take on the characteristics of what they were created from, the front alters have to be some of the first splits so that they have a sense of family and that they're human. That does not mean that the first series of splits can't be dehumanized later. They are turned into gems, crystals. How do you make an alter into an animal alter? It may not be quite as difficult as some may imagine, because they can create alters with clean slates. That is, they are the plain tablets that Dr. White, Dr. Ewan Cameron, prided himself that he was able to make out of adult minds. When a part of the mind has no reality to reference, and is tortured and told lies, then it will accept what the programmer says is real. When an alter is created via torture, if you want a cat alter, they will have the child tortured in a cage surrounded by cats of some type. The new alters will be told they are cats. Their programmers will actually kill a little child in the worst way in front of these alters and tell them that that is what happens to little girls and boys. Do they want to be a little girl? No. After watching the horrible things that happen to little girls, they do not want to be little girls or little boys, as the case may be. They want to be a cat, because as a cat they will not be killed and tortured like the children. The alters are forced to eat like cats with cats. They are repeatedly shamed and degraded and repeatedly told they are cats. Lie detector instruments are hooked up to the child to determine if the alters actually believe they are cats. When the alter can actually state, "I'm a kitten," or "I'm a tiger," and pass the lie detector test, then the programmers know they have succeeded. But what if the mind resists being told it is a cat? As long as the child is a girl, it is given feces to eat. But the cats are fed wholesome meals in front of the victim. The little girls in the other cages are dirty and tortured and ill-fed. Do you want to be a little girl? A great deal of simple torture is applied to make sure that the correct answers are given. If your life depended upon saying you were a cat, you'd be a cat too. Further, children have a vivid imagination. Normal children can easily role-play, and they can easily imagine they are something they aren't, because their personalities and egos have not solidified. Again, nothing is left to chance. A fake blood transfusion of cat blood may be given the child. Very often high-speed films of kittens playing and having fun are shown in one eye, while the other eye is forced to view little girls having to undergo the worst of tortures. This viewing is forced upon the child, as its eyes are held open and the child is strapped into a viewing chair. The dehumanization process will make alters into various types of birds, cats, dogs, aliens, horses, earth elements, gemstones, rocks, and countless other items. They will then place in backup programming to ensure that the alters continue to believe they are not human. The ingenuity of the backup programming to ensure that they continue to believe the lies are extensive and ingenious. A great deal of hypnosis, and drug-induced states, and drug hypnosis is used to carry out the dehumanization process. The programming will be reinforced by a cat alter's environment, because the alter's handlers will always refer to them as kittens or other types of cats. The painful rape of a child with its leg held in a butterfly configuration is used to get butterfly alters. To get a puppet, the body is given a drug which paralyzes the child. Then electroshock is applied to certain muscles upon the command of the programmer. The effect is that the child has no control over his body, and the programmer can make the child's body parts jerk and move by electroshocking the muscles. The child actually becomes the puppet of the programmer. This is a very powerful program. One of the names connected with monarch programming is marionette programming. The child literally becomes a marionette. This concept appears to have been cooked up by the Germans under Hitler. An alter system as a child is physically shown that they are a marionette puppet. Their muscles are electroshocked in such a way as to take advantage of the natural reflexes. When electroshocked that way, the victim's body parts jerk out of our control at the whim of the programmer to prove to the victim that they are a puppet. At this time, the rules are given, and rule number 8 is that the alters are their puppet. Illuminati programmer Dr. Mengele used puppets in a dollhouse as he programmed. He did skits with his puppets. Dance marionette dance, he'd say in his thick German accent. Pinocchio's story was used to name the spirit guide Jiminy Cricket. Along with rule no. 8, he taught the following rules at this point. 1. Listen to your instructions. 2. There is no room for error. 3. The game timer. These were the specifics of how to move, the melted mirror, etc. 4. There is a chain of command, the king's men. 5. Your master would chart your course. 6. You will receive orders, what to do, a memorized script to follow and fulfill. 7. The creator and master would always own you into infinity. 8. You are puppets on a string. Dance marionette dance. You are to speak only those words told to you, and to only speak those words when your string is pulled. 9. There is no room for questions. 10. The controller always plays the role of the white rabbit. Dark side alters of a system are taught to know these rules as part of their being. Dr. Joseph Mengele, known as Dr. Green, carried a violin, which was used during programming. He programmed slaves to respond to the keyword fiddler. During programming, the victim will be made to believe that all their insides have been removed and tape recorders placed into them and surgically hooked up. To the child being programmed, this is real. This is part of the dehumanization process to protect them from spiritual growth and freedom. The programmer's dehumanization parallels what is done in the army when the drill sergeant yells at the new recruits names such as maggot and worm. Porcelain face programming. The porcelain face programming was already touched on earlier in chapters 2 and 7 when the fire tortures and gatekeeper altars were written about. Fire torture in melted wax is used to make the child victim believe their face has been burned. Then the programmer generously gives the traumatized alters a porcelain mask. The alter getting the porcelain face may be given a gem, hypnotically like jade, that becomes their secret name. There are several different methods that are available to lay in the porcelain face programming. There has been a great deal of porcelain casts made of people's faces and then masks made of them. In fact, when a handler dies, at least in one case the replacement handler wore a mask to look like the previous handler. Human baby skin is used to construct a mask from the victim's facial cast. A mask is worn by the Illuminati victim when they are married to the Antichrist. The porcelain masks are often part of the Camelot and Shakespeare programming. Another use of porcelain masks which was only experimented with was to place masks on pawn altars which were used as altars who would guard things by scaring other altars with their fearful porcelain countenances. This programming has spiritual ramifications, because it is one of the programming methods to steal altars of their faces. The altars getting porcelain face programming will only see a porcelain face in the mirror until the programming is taken down. As long as the computer on their level is operating, the programming to that altar will be intact. Hearts of stone. The programmers leave no stone unturned when they strip the altars of a system of any vestige of humanity they might have. The programmers make the altars believe that the programmers have surgically removed their hearts and replaced them with a stone. To reinforce this programming, the victim is hypnotized to fall into a deep trance if at any time the victim's deeper altars are hooked up to anything monitoring the heart. If and when someone tried to prove that these altars have a heart by taking their pulse, they may be surprised when these altars trance deep enough that the machine doesn't even read. This is how the programming keeps the lies safe from exposure. The programmers will hypnotically take the hearts for a number of reasons. One is blackmail. They will promise to return the hearts if the victim obeys, returns home to the cult when needed, and is present when the Antichrist needs the victim. It is doubtful these altars would get their hearts back by their cult considering all the false promises that are typically made. The programmers will give the hearts to a Queen Mother altar for safekeeping. They may be hidden somewhere like in the Temple of Molech. The Temple of Molech on some survivors is used as a depository for memories of child sacrifices. It is not a place any altar could or would want to go in the internal world. In return, the programmers give the victim stones, yes, hearts of stone. Stone-like protectors will stand guard in the background. Their voodoo doll appearance reflects the voodoo images that are built into monarch internal worlds. By removing the victim's hearts, it removes any chance that dark altars would have a soft warm spot in their heart for anyone. They will be told that they are incapable of having friends or of loving others. This is quite effective in separating these altars from others. That isolation is a part of the mind control, because the altars believe they have no life source within themselves, that is no heart, they have to look to their master. If the master places his hand upon the victim's chest, they may feel alive. Because people need a heart to feel, altars are programmed to believe that they are incapable of feeling and have no feelings. They cannot cry during their own suffering, and are encouraged to feel incapable of caring for the suffering of others. In spite of all the brutality and isolation of the programming, the altar's humanity will lay in the background, but whether altars will ever acknowledge that humanity is a big question. If people ask these heartless altars to give their hearts to Jesus, they may be told that they don't have one. In all covenants, something is given to the cult. In this case, the victims' hearts are, hypnotically, given to the satanic master. There is a keeper of the seals who keeps the items given when a vow or covenant is made. If a person is a traitor to a vow, then the cult has an object, carry out voodoo or magic upon to punish the person. Monarch mind-controlled slaves know their orders, and are locked into obedience. Hypnotic surgery. After the programmers steal the deeper altar's hearts, their identities, their free will, their real families, and their faces and their humanity, they are kind enough to sew back into the victim's chest via hypnotic surgery black stones. They do all this surgery by hypnosis. Via hypnosis, the programmers can heal the victim's wounds after they torture the victim. They can basically make or remake reality to be what they want. Part 500 Fear. The thing that stands out so vividly for those who have met victims who are in therapy is the spirits of fear that control them. Waves of paranoia roll back and forth through the altars. Everyone needs to bear in mind that the programmers were sadists, and they didn't get satisfaction from their programming until they could see raw terror in their victims. The primary vehicle for programming was the raw terror that is repeatedly instilled into the victim. To achieve total terror, the sadist programmer gains total control over every aspect of a person, their thoughts, their bowel movements, their life. Even the power to commit suicide is stripped from the victim. Nothing that originally belonged to the victim is left untouched. A realistic fear of most victims is that they will never be believed. Indeed, many therapists are serving the final insult to these severely traumatized people by denying the authenticity of things the victim experienced himself and even wishes were not true. For a victim to overcome their fear to tell, after all the years of programming not to tell and threats not to tell, is an enormous feat. Very few victims ever get to this point, and yet, when they do overcome this enormous barrier, they must face disbelief. Traditionally, the psychiatrists have treated these victims as if their abuse is nothing but psychotic nonsense. How many fleeing victims have been locked up and told they were paranoid schizophrenics? The fear of losing one's identity within a coven or religious group, says the Church of Scientology, is balanced out by the structured framework that these groups have. Members identify with each other because they participate in the same rituals and have given their allegiance to the same idealized master. Part E. The use of guilt, shame, ridicule, and anger. The Chinese and police agencies have been especially good at developing methods to solicit confessions. This is done by a variety of punishment and reward strategies, and the Mutt and Jeff routine. Confession and self-criticism have been used by religious groups, especially the Jesuits, as a method to convert persons to and then perpetuate a belief. One of the things that the deeper altars will not be taught about is forgiveness. Because forgiveness of oneself and others is such an important spiritual dynamic, to not know about forgiveness cripples many deeper altars from healing from the deep spiritual wounds they have received. Forgiveness is an act of the will. Forgiveness of oneself is usually a major issue with deeper altars who generally don't know how to do this. However, the handlers and abusers will be sure to heap lots of guilt, whether deserved or not, onto the poor mind-controlled victim. It is natural for a person to focus on himself. After all, if a person doesn't think for himself, who will? Often a person accepts their strengths, but focuses on their weaknesses, hoping that that weakness will somehow be reduced by the focus that is placed upon it. The programmers know how to take advantage of that. They set impossible standards of perfection, and then demean the victim, because they have failed to live up to the impossible standard of perfection. Black and white thinking develops in the slave's mind. The programmers will not allow the victim to display natural feelings of anger, sadness, or doubt. To do so means that one is a failure and weak. Of course they are natural feelings, so the slave has to do a great deal of repression and self-incrimination for having these natural feelings. The slave learns to turn his or her anger inward. Many of the male slaves end up committing suicide. They beat themselves up with subconscious and conscious guilt. Anything and everything wrong or bad in the slave's life is blamed upon him. Of course, not all things are meant to be remembered by the slave. Guilt can play a natural role in the forgetting of memories too. If the monarch slave would remember something terrible, the religious front altars can be made to feel repentant for such terrible thoughts. Then the natural desire to forget can be reinforced by suggesting that the evil memory be removed from the mind. In other words, after all.
Okay, so let me explain some of that if people didn't get it. Because, oh my god, the weed is kicking in. The edible I had is kicking in, so I'm gonna need to sleep soon. But before I do, let me explain this. What they're saying is that you give shock to a person. Those were really, really fucking drastic. I didn't read it before I played that, so I just saw the word rape in there, and I was like, okay, this is going to be drastic. But what they're saying is that you traumatize someone with an object. Like if I beat the shit out of I feel bad saying this. If I beat the shit out of a turtle and I put a beach ball in front of its face while I beat it every single day, it would be terrified of a beach ball. If you abuse something and then you call it something, or when you're abusing something and you ignore it, you don't talk to it while you're abusing it, but then you pet it on the head after and then say its name when you're petting it on the head, then you're being nice to it, or person. They're also saying you don't say their name. If you say their name, it gives them creativity and a sense of human, who they are. That's why they said call them a cat, or a rock, or a crystal, or something. Calling them an object instead of a person. So you introduce trauma, which I would have to say 70% of U.S. parents do to their children, which is disciplining, but really it's more of dehumanizing. Then the kids grow up and they have grudges against their parents for some reason, or their step-parents or something that they try to suppress. I don't suppress anything. But yeah, any kind of form of, your parents could ignore you every day. You try to show them a picture that you drew or some shit like that. They don't look at it. They call it bad. They call it shit. And then you get better and better and better and better and better at it. And then they keep saying it's bad until you finally get good. And then they're like, yeah, that's better. What they're doing is conditioning a human being. You can either dehumanize someone or condition them, which is dehumanizing, is pretty much conditioning them. But you can do it in a way to make someone improve on their life rather than take away their humanity. Like, you cannot compliment someone on their work and they will literally, quite literally, get better at it because they think it's not good, so they'll try harder. Or if they're that kind of person who will give up, then they'll just give up. Yeah. So if you understood any of the stuff the robot said, the robot voice my computer has, then good, you learned something. Something violent and abusive, but you learned something. I'll probably do more of these videos on the practices. And if I join the Illuminati, this is not what I would do. They have different branches, different parts of the Illuminati. They have people who work for the Illuminati that, I want to say, condition kids that are born into the Illuminati. They have lots and lots of parts, different parts of the Illuminati. They got the leaders, they got the people who work for the leaders, they got the people who work under the leaders. They have so many workers, different categories. But if you want to be in their little 1% club, you gotta be fucking rich. Just letting you know that. And one day I will be. Creepiest face on the planet. Yeah, just had to do that. Now I'm gonna go sleep on that bed over there. The mattress. No, I'm gonna sleep on the floor actually.